The Galactic Council chambers stretched across 3 kilometers of floating crystal platforms. And on this day, every seat was filled with representatives from 100 different species, who had come together to witness something that would change everything they believed about the universe and its strangest inhabitants. For 300 years, the aliens of the Galactic Council had watched humanity with a mixture of curiosity and gentle amusement. And in all that time, they had never once felt afraid of the creatures from the small blue planet called Earth. Ambassador Elena Vance stood at the human delegation's platform with her warm smile and her habit of bringing homemade cookies to every meeting. And the other species had grown to see her as the perfect example of what humanity represented to the galaxy. The Valkyrie with their 4 arms and 4 hearts called humans the soft ones, because they had observed how humans would cry at beautiful music and laugh at silly jokes and spend hours caring for small animals they called pets. The crystalline Moraveth found humans to be charmingly emotional creatures who painted pictures of sunsets and wrote poetry about love and seemed to find joy in the smallest things that other species considered meaningless. The insectoid Kyrix had calculated that humans posed 0 threat to galactic security because their military was small and their weapons were outdated, and they seemed more interested in exploring and making friends than in conquering territory. Council of Reth of the Valkyrie had worked alongside Ambassador Vance for 50 years, and he considered her one of his closest friends despite the biological differences between their species. Elena, he would often say with his rumbling voice, "Your people are perhaps the gentlest souls in all the galaxy. I mean this as the highest compliment, Ambassador." Vance would always smile at this and offer him another cookie and talk about her grandchildren back on Earth and the flowers growing in her garden on the colony world of New Geneva. The humans had integrated into galactic society with remarkable ease, and they traded fairly and never broke their agreements and always seemed eager to help other species with problems, both large and small. When the Moraveth needed assistance rebuilding after a natural disaster, it was the humans who arrived first with supplies and volunteers and warm blankets and kind words of encouragement. The Kyrix Hive Queens required medical knowledge to cure a plague. It was human doctors who worked without sleep for weeks until they found a solution and asked for nothing in return. This was humanity as the galaxy knew them, and this was the image that had become fixed in every alien mind across 1,000 star systems. Then the Kethvar Dominion arrived from beyond the galactic rim, and everything changed forever. First reports came from a distant outpost near the edge of known space where a Moraveth trading station had gone silent without warning or explanation. Scout ships were sent to investigate, and what they found was horror beyond anything the peaceful galaxy had ever witnessed. Kethvar were a species of parasitic conquerors who would spend 10,000 years consuming civilization after civilization in the dark spaces between galaxies. And now they had found new feeding grounds. Their ships were black as the void itself and shaped like massive clawed hands, reaching out to grasp and tear and devour everything in their path. The Moraveth trading station had been reduced to floating debris, and the bodies of its inhabitants had been harvested for biological material in ways that made even the most hardened military officers feel sick. Within weeks, the Kethvar Armada had grown from a scouting force to a full invasion fleet of over 10,000 vessels that darkened the stars wherever they traveled. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session as reports flooded in from every corner of the frontier about attacks and massacres and entire colonies being stripped of life. Council of Reth stood before the assembly with his 4 hands trembling as he presented the evidence of Kethvar atrocities that had been collected from survivors and sensor recordings. They do not negotiate, he announced to the horrified delegates, and they do not accept surrender, and they do not take prisoners except to use as food and raw materials for their endless expansion. The crystalline forms of the Moraveth delegation flickered with grief as images appeared showing their homeworld under siege by the Shadow Black Armada that had already destroyed 3 of their major cities' children were being harvested in the streets, and families were being torn apart, and the once beautiful crystal spires of Moraveth Prime were crumbling under orbital bombardment. The Kirix Queen Delegate calculated that at the current rate of Kethver expansion, the entire galactic arm would be consumed within 40 cycles, and there was nothing in there. Combined military forces capable of stopping it, the Valkyrie announced that they were evacuating their border colonies and pulling back their fleet to defend their core worlds because they saw no hope of victory against such overwhelming force panic. Spread through the council chamber as species after species declared their intention to flee or hide or simply accept the inevitable end of everything they had built, Ambassador. Elena Vance sat quietly through all of this chaos and watched the footage of Moraveth children being dragged from their homes by Kethver harvesters. And her expression did not change even once. The other delegates barely noticed her silence because they were too busy arguing and crying and preparing for the end of galactic civilization as they knew it, finally, when the noise had reached its peak and despair had settled over the chamber like a heavy blanket. Ambassador Vance rose slowly from her seat. The chamber fell silent because there was something different about the way she moved, and something strange about the look in her eyes that made every alien present pay attention. She walked to the central speaking platform with measured steps and stood there for a long moment looking at the images of suffering that still played on the display screens. "The Moraveth are under our protection," she said in a voice that carried no emotion, but somehow filled the entire chamber with its quiet intensity. "The children you see on these screens have visited Earth and played with human children and learned human songs and eaten human food." She paused and looked around at the assembled delegates with eyes that had gone cold and flat like the surface of a frozen lake. "We will handle this." Those 4 words hung in the air as Ambassador Vance turned and walked out of the chamber without another word or backward glance. Counselor Vreth watched her go and felt something he had never felt before when looking at a human. He felt the first tiny seed of fear take root in his 4 hearts. The soft ones had stopped smiling. The Galactic Council expected many things from humanity in the days following Ambassador Vance's dramatic departure from the emergency session. They expected diplomatic messages and strongly worded protests, and perhaps even offers of humanitarian aid for the refugees fleeing from Kethver aggression. They expected the humans to organize relief efforts and send medical ships, and do all the gentle, helpful things that humans had always done whenever tragedy struck the galaxy. What they did not expect was silence, complete and total and terrifying silence on the first day after the finally council meeting. Every human communication channel went dark without warning or explanation. The trade delegations that had been negotiating contracts on a dozen different worlds simply packed their belongings and left without saying goodbye to anyone. Merchant ships that had been carrying goods across the galaxy changed course and headed toward Sol at maximum speed, regardless of the profits. They were abandoning the human embassy on the Valkyrie. Homeworld closed its doors and its staff vanished overnight, leaving behind only empty rooms and the faint smell of coffee. Counselor Vreth tried repeatedly to contact Ambassador Vance through every channel he knew, but received only automated messages saying that all human diplomatic personnel were unavailable by the 3rd day. The other council species had begun to notice that something very strange was happening with humanity. The Kirix intelligence network reported that Earth had gone completely dark, with no signals of any kind being broadcast from the human homeworld. The Moraveth astronomers, watching Sol through their powerful telescopes, saw human ships converging from every direction like fish swimming toward a single point in the ocean. By the 5th day, rumors had begun to spread through the council about what humanity might be planning. Some Species believed the humans were preparing to flee the galaxy entirely and abandon everyone else to face the Kethver alone. Others thought the humans were simply hiding because they were afraid and did not want to admit their weakness to the other species. Few whispered that perhaps the humans were sick with some terrible plague and had quarantined themselves to prevent it from spreading. Council of Vreth did not believe any of these theories because he had seen something in Ambassador Vance's eyes that told him a very different story. On the seventh day of silence, he locked himself in his private study and accessed the ancient archives that contained everything the galaxy had ever learned about humanity. He started with the basic information that every species knew about Earth, and its dominant inhabitants, humans, were mammals who had evolved on a world with moderate gravity and a nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere, and they had developed technology remarkably quickly compared to most species. They were social creatures who lived in family groups and formed strong emotional bonds and seemed to genuinely enjoy the company of other beings. All of this was familiar and reassuring, and exactly what Vreth had always believed about his human friends. Then he went deeper into the archives and began reading the records that few aliens had ever bothered to examine. He found the history of human warfare, stretching back thousands of years and filled with conflicts of such brutal efficiency that his four hearts began to beat faster with growing uneasy. Found records of human weapons designed not just to kill, but to cause maximum suffering and terror in their enemies. He found accounts of human soldiers who had fought in conditions that would kill most alien species within hours and kept fighting for days or weeks or months without surrender. But the thing that finally made Counselor Vreth understand what was happening was a simple biological fact about human evolution that he had never considered. Before, humans were not prey animals, as the Council had always assumed based on their gentle behavior and emotional nature. Humans were predators, not the kind of predators who relied on speed or strength or venom to catch their food. Like so many species across the galaxy, humans were something far more terrifying. They were pursuit predators. The archives explained that ancient humans had hunted their prey not by chasing it down quickly, but by following it relentlessly across vast distances until the animal simply collapsed from exhaustion. A human could track a single creature for days without stopping because humans could regulate their body temperature through sweating and could carry water with them and could keep moving long after other animals needed to rest. The prey would run and the human would follow. The prey would hide and the human would find it. The prey would fight and the human would wait for it to tire. Eventually, the prey would simply give up and lie down and accept its death because there was no escape from a hunter who never stopped pursuing. Vreth sat in his study with this knowledge burning in his mind and suddenly understood everything he had seen in Ambassador Vance's eyes. The warmth and gentleness that humans showed the galaxy was real and genuine, and not a deception. But it was also a choice. Humans had chosen to be soft because they lived in a peaceful galaxy where softness was rewarded and violence was unnecessary. They had chosen to hide the predator inside them because there was no prey to hunt and no reason to reveal their true nature. But now something had changed. Now there was prey. The Kethver had made themselves prey by attacking those under human protection. And now humanity was doing what pursuit predators had done since the dawn of their existence. They were preparing for the hunt. Vreth ran to the council chamber and demanded an emergency meeting to share what he had discovered. The other delegates listened with confusion and skepticism as he explained the true nature of humanity. "You are being dramatic." The Curix Queen delegate clicked dismissively. "And humans are too soft to be real predators. Regardless of what your archives say about their ancient history, they bring cookies to meetings," a Moraveth counselor added, "and cry at sad music. And this is not the behavior of dangerous hunters." Vreth tried to make them understand, but they would not listen because they could not imagine their gentle human friends as anything other than the soft ones they had always known on the 12th Day of silence, the answer finally came. A single transmission broadcast across every frequency in the galaxy, simultaneously from the Sol System. It was Ambassador Elena Vance standing on the bridge of a ship that none of them had ever seen before. Behind her, through the viewports, stretched a fleet of human warships so vast that they blocked out the stars. The ships had names painted on their hulls in bold letters that the translation systems rendered into every language in the galaxy: persistence, endurance, relentless. No mercy. Ambassador Vance looked into the camera with eyes that had become something ancient and terrible, and spoke in a voice that carried across light years. "We have identified our prey," she said calmly, "and now we begin the hunt, and we will not stop until it is finished. The transmission ended and the Sin's mission, and we will not stop until it is finished. The transmission ended and the Chin's mission. The transmission, and we will not stop until it is finished." Galactic Council sat in stunned silence as they realized that Council Vreth had been right about everything. The Soft Ones had awakened something old inside themselves. Something patient, something relentless, something that would never stop following its prey until the hunt was complete. And across the galaxy, the Kethver Dominion had no idea what was coming for them. The human fleet emerged from Sol like a swarm of predators rising from the depths of a dark ocean, and the galaxy held its breath as it witnessed something that had been sleeping for 300 years. Counselor Vreth stood at the observation deck of the Council Station and watched the sensor readings with all four of his eyes as ship after ship after ship appeared on the screens. The numbers kept climbing higher and higher until the Kirik's Queen delegate stopped her calculations because the result was too frightening to announce out loud. No one in the galaxy had known that humanity possessed such a fleet because the humans had kept it hidden, away in shipyards deep beneath the surfaces of moons and asteroids throughout their home system. These were not the small, peaceful trading vessels that the galaxy had grown accustomed to seeing with human markings on their hulls. These were warships built for one purpose, and one purpose only. They were built to hunt. The first human vessels arrived at Council Station 3 days after the Great Fleet departed from Sol, and what stepped off those ships was not the humanity that the galaxy had known. Ambassador Vance walked down the boarding ramp in a uniform that none of the Council species had ever seen before. It was black and fitted close to her body, and marked with symbols that the translation systems identified as belonging to something called the United Earth Military Command. Her warm smile was gone, and her eyes had changed into something that made even the bravest alien delegates step back involuntarily when she looked at them. There was no anger in those eyes, and no hatred, and no visible emotion of any kind. There was only focus, pure and absolute and terrifying focus. She walked through the corridors of Council Station with a group of human soldiers flanking her on both sides, and every alien who saw them felt the same strange chill run through their bodies. The soldiers were smiling, actually smiling with their teeth showing as they moved through the station with weapons on their hips and eagerness in their steps. Councilor Vreth had read about this in the archives, but seeing it in person was something entirely different. Human soldiers did not fear battle the way other species did, because somewhere deep in their genetic memory they remembered what it felt like to be the hunter instead of the hunted. Emergency council session began within the hour, and Ambassador Vance stood at the central platform to address the assembled delegates. "The Kethver Dominion has made a mistake," she said in a voice that was calm and steady, and somehow more frightening than any shouting could have been. They believed that the galaxy was weak because its species had chosen peace over war and cooperation over conflict. She paused and looked around the chamber at the hundreds of alien faces staring back at her with mixtures of fear and confusion and desperate hope. "They were correct about most of you," she continued without any insult in her tone, "because you are indeed peaceful species who have evolved beyond the need for violence. And this is not a weakness, but a sign of your civilization's advancement. But they made an error when they assumed that humans were the same. A holographic display activated behind her, showing a map of the galaxy with Kethver territory marked and spreading red like an infection, consuming healthy tissue. We have analyzed their expansion patterns and identified their fleet movements and located their supply lines and breeding stations throughout the sector they have claimed. New markers appeared on the map in blue, showing the positions of human forces converging from multiple directions toward the Kethver territory. We have calculated their population centers and mapped their command structure and determined that this location of their homeworld based on communication intercepts. The Curix Queen delegate made a clicking sound of surprise, because her own intelligence network had been trying to find the Kethver homeworld for months without success. How did you accomplish this so quickly? She asked with genuine curiosity, overcoming her fear. Ambassador Vance turned to face her with those cold, focused eyes and answered simply, "Because this is what we do," she said. "And we have been doing it since before we learned to make fire, or build shelters, or speak in words. We identify our prey, and we learn everything about it, and then we hunt it until it cannot run anymore." A human general stepped forward to present the military briefing, and his smile never wavered as he described the campaign that humanity had planned. "We will not engage in large fleet battles," he explained, "because that would give the enemy a chance to fight back effectively, and we do not intend to give them any chances at all. Instead, we will use small strike teams to shadow their vessels and track their movements and gather intelligence on their weaknesses. We will let them know that we are watching them without attacking, so that fear has time to grow in their minds and weaken their resolve. When they begin to panic and make mistakes, we will strike at their supply lines and cut off their food sources and destroy their ability to reproduce. We will not try to kill them quickly, because quick deaths do not serve our purpose. We will kill them slowly and systematically, and we will make sure that every single Kethvar knows that there is no escape from what is hunting them." The council chamber was completely silent as the delegates absorbed what they were hearing. This was not warfare as they understood it. This was something older and more primal. This was predation. The Moraveth counselor raised a trembling crystalline hand and asked a question that everyone was thinking. "What if they try to surrender?" she asked hopefully. "And what if they offer peace in exchange for their survival?" Ambassador Vance turned to face her. Then for just a moment something flickered in her eyes that might have been the warmth the galaxy remembered. "The Kethver harvested your children," she said quietly, "and used them for food and raw materials while they were still alive and screaming." The warmth disappeared and the cold focus returned. "There will be no peace offered and no surrender accepted," she declared, "because we have entered hunting mode, and we do not leave hunting mode until the prey is gone. All of it. Every last one." She turned and walked out of the council chamber with her soldiers following behind her and left the galaxy to contemplate what it had just witnessed. The soft ones had revealed what they truly were beneath the gentleness and the cookies and the tears at beautiful music. They were the most patient and relentless hunters the universe had ever produced. And now they had found prey worthy of their attention. Counselor Vreth watched the human delegation depart and said a quiet prayer for the Kethver Dominion, not because he wanted them to survive, but because he almost felt sorry for what was about to happen to them. The Kethver had conquered 17 civilizations across 10,000 years of expansion through the dark spaces between galaxies, and in all that time, they had never once known what it felt like to be afraid. They were the apex predators of their region of space, and every species they encountered either submitted to harvesting or was hunted down and consumed without mercy. Fear was something that happened to other species, and the Kethver had evolved beyond such primitive emotions long ago. That changed 6 months after humanity entered hunting mode. The First sign that something was wrong came from a Kethvar patrol fleet operating near the edge of their newly claimed territory. The fleet commander reported detecting a small group of human vessels following at extreme sensor range and maintaining a constant distance regardless of course changes or speed adjustments. Ordered his ships to turn and engage the humans in direct combat because the Kethvar did not run from inferior forces. The human ships simply withdrew and vanished into the void before the Kethvar could close the distance. The patrol fleet continued its mission and tried to forget about the strange encounter. 3 days later, the humans were back, same distance, same formation. Just watching, the fleet commander changed course toward a different sector and increased speed to maximum sustainable levels. The humans matched his course and speed perfectly without ever getting closer or falling behind on. The 5th day of being followed, the commander ordered his fleet to stop completely and wait for the humans to either attack or leave. The humans stopped too. They just sat there in the darkness of space and watched with their sensors and their cameras and their patient predator eyes. After 12 days of this constant observation, the Kethvar crews began to crack under the psychological pressure. Fights broke out between soldiers who accused each other of cowardice and officers who could not agree on how to respond to an enemy that would not fight. The fleet commander himself stopped sleeping because every time he closed his eyes, he imagined human vessels closing in on his position. During his moment of weakness on the 14th day, the fleet received orders to return to a supply station for resupply and crew rotation. They arrived to find the station destroyed. Every Kethvar aboard had been killed, and the storage facilities had been emptied of food and fuel and ammunition. A message had been left written in Kethvar blood on the walls of the command center. "We see you," it said, "and we are coming." This scene repeated itself across Kethvar Tori as human strike teams appeared and disappeared like ghosts in the night supply. Convoys vanished without distress signals. Breeding stations were found empty with no sign of what had happened to the thousands of Kethvar who had lived there. Scout ships sent to investigate disturbances never returned, and their final transmissions always ended the same way. "They found us," the scouts would say, "and they are not stopping." The Kethvar High Command tried everything they could think of to counter the human threat. They concentrated their fleets into massive battle groups that no small strike team could hope to challenge. The humans simply watched those fleets from a distance and waited. They waited while the Kethvar consumed their supplies sitting in one place. They waited while the Kethvar crews grew restless and paranoid from being watched constantly. They waited while the Kethvar commanders made mistake after mistake trying to catch an enemy that would not stand and fight. Then, when the fleets were forced to disperse to resupply, the humans struck not at the warships themselves, but at the supply lines that kept them running. One by one, the Kethvar fleets found themselves stranded without fuel or food or ammunition, while human vessels circled at the edge of sensor range. Some fleets tried to surrender, but the humans did not respond to their signals. Others tried to flee toward Kethvar core territory, but found human ships waiting at every jump point and transit route. Kethvar began to understand something that no species had ever taught them before. Understood what it felt like to be prey counselor. Vreth received regular updates from human military liaisons about the progress of the campaign, and each report was more disturbing than the last. "We have identified the location of their primary breeding world," one report stated, "and we estimate their population has decreased by 30% since the campaign began. Their fleet strength has been reduced by half through attrition and supply disruption. Morale among Kethvar forces has collapsed, and we are receiving reports of mass desertion and suicide among crews who can no longer endure the constant surveillance." The Kirik's Queen delegate analyzed the data and calculated that the Kethvar Dominion would cease to exist as a functioning civilization within 1 solar year. She shared her findings with the council and added her own observation. The humans are not trying to defeat the Kethver in battle, she noted, because they are not fighting a war in any way that we understand. They are conducting a hunt, and the goal of a hunt is not victory, but extinction. Ambassador Vance appeared before the council one final time to deliver an update. On the campaign, the Kethver leadership has sent us requests for negotiation, she reported, and they have offered to withdraw from this galaxy entirely in exchange for peace. Hope flickered in the eyes of several delegates, who still believed that some mercy might be possible. We have declined their offer, Ambassador Vance continued, because we do not negotiate with prey. They will try to flee and we will follow them. They will try to hide and we will find them. They will try to fight and we will wear them down until they cannot fight anymore. This hunt will end when there are no more Kethver left to hunt. She paused and looked at the delegates with something that might have been sadness in her cold, focused eyes. You asked us to handle this, and we are handling it in the only way we know how. We are sorry that you have to see this side of us, but we will not apologize for what we are. We are human, and humans do not stop hunting until the prey is gone. That is our nature and our curse and our gift to those we have chosen to protect. She turned and left the council chamber for the final time. During the campaign behind her, the delegates sat in silence, contemplating the terrible truth about their gentle human friends. The soft ones had become something else entirely, and, somewhere in the darkness of space, the Kethver Dominion was learning that there is no escape from a predator that never stops following. The end came 18 months after humanity first declared their intention to hunt the Kethver Dominion to extinction, and it happened exactly as Ambassador Vance had promised it would. Final battle took place above the Kethver homeworld, which human intelligence had located within the first month of the campaign, but had chosen not to attack until the time was right. Instead, the humans had spent those 18 months systematically destroying everything that connected the Kethver homeworld to the rest of their civilization. Supply lines were cut and breeding stations were eliminated, and fleets were worn down through constant harassment until the homeworld stood alone and isolated and completely surrounded by patient human vessels. Kethver Supreme Overmind transmitted one final message to the human fleet, demanding to know why they would not accept surrender and why they insisted on total annihilation when the war had already been won. Ambassador Vance herself responded to the message from the bridge of the flagship Persistence. You ask why we will not stop, she said calmly, and the answer is simple. You touched what was ours. You harvested children who had eaten at our tables and played with our young and learned our songs. You made yourself our prey, and prey does not get to decide when the hunt ends. Only the hunter decides that. The Kethver homeworld burned for 3 days as human forces descended on every population center and military installation and government facility. There were no prisoners taken because humans do not capture prey. There were no refugees allowed to escape because humans do not let prey flee to rebuild elsewhere. When it was over, the human fleet gathered in orbit above a world that had been scoured of all Kethver life and broadcast a single message across all galactic frequencies. The hunt is complete. And then something remarkable happened. The human war machine that had terrorized the most fearsome species in galactic history simply stopped. The great warships with names like Persistence and Endurance and No Mercy turned away from the dead Kethver worlds and set course back toward Saw. Soldiers who had spent 18 months hunting without rest returned to their families and their farms and their ordinary lives as if nothing had happened. The shipyards that had built the greatest military fleet in galactic history went quiet, and the weapons that had ended a 10,000-year-old civilization were carefully stored away in deep bunkers beneath moons and asteroids. Ambassador Elena Vance returned to Council Station 1 month after the final battle wearing her old diplomatic uniform instead of the black military suit she had worn during the campaign. She brought cookies, chocolate, chip from her grandmother's recipe baked fresh that morning in her kitchen. On New Geneva, she smiled warmly at Counselor Vreth and asked about his family and laughed at his terrible jokes and cried when the Morveth children sang a song of thanks for the humans who had saved them. The warmth had returned. Softness had returned. The soft ones were soft again, but the galaxy would never forget what they had witnessed. Counselor Vreth spent the remaining years of his life working on a project that he considered more important than anything else he had ever done. He compiled every piece of information about humanity that existed in the Galactic archives and combined it with his personal observations and his conversations with human friends and his memories of what he had seen during the Kethvar campaign. The result was a document that was distributed to every species in the Galactic Council and stored in every archive and taught to every young diplomat who might one day interact with humans. It began with a simple statement. Humans appear to be a gentle and emotional species who value friendship and cooperation and show kindness to strangers without expecting anything in return. This observation is accurate but incomplete. The document went on to explain the dual nature of humanity in terms that every species could understand. Humans contain within themselves two separate beings that share the same body and the same mind, but serve very different purposes. The first being is the one that humans choose to show the galaxy most of the time. This is the being that cries at beautiful music and paints pictures of sunsets and spends hours caring for small animals and brings cookies to diplomatic meetings. This being is warm and gentle and genuinely wants to live in peace with all other species. The second being is much older and much more dangerous. This is the being that evolved on a hostile world where survival required the ability to hunt prey across vast distances without ever stopping or giving up. This being does not feel anger or hatred because such emotions interfere with the focus required for a successful hunt. This being is patient beyond measure and relentless beyond reason and will pursue its prey until one of them is dead. Humans do not choose which being they show the galaxy based on strategy or deception. They choose based on what the situation requires. When they are among friends and allies, they are genuinely soft, because softness is what makes life worth living. When something threatens those they have claimed as their own, they become hunters, because that is what survival requires. The document ended with a warning that Counselor Vreth hoped would prevent any future species from making the same mistake as the Kethvar. If you wish to live in peace with humanity, then simply treat them with respect and do not harm those under their protection. They will be the best friends you have ever known, and they will help you without asking for reward, and they will enrich your civilization with their art and music and laughter. But if you choose to become their enemy, then understand what you are choosing. You are choosing to become prey, and prey does not negotiate with the hunter. Prey does not hide from the hunter. Prey runs and runs and runs until it cannot run anymore, and then the hunter catches it. Do not threaten what humans love. Do not harm what humans protect. Do not ever under any circumstances make yourself their prey, because the soft ones are soft by choice, and they can choose differently whenever they wish. At the bottom of the document, Counselor Vreth added one final note written in his own words. I have known humans for most of my life, and I consider them to be among the kindest and most compassionate beings in the galaxy. I have also seen what they become when the kindness is answered with cruelty. Trust the softness because it is real, but remember what lies beneath it, and be grateful that they have chosen to be your friends. The document became required reading for every species in the Galactic Council and was passed down through generations as a reminder of the